how Rose Cheramy, a dancer in the Dallas club, knew Rudy. She claimed that Rudy and Oswald, who were seen together at Rudy's carousel club by multiple witnesses, quote, had been shacking up for years, unquote. When arrested, Rudy was a 52-year-old bachelor who spoke with a lisp and, quote, lived with a succession of young men, unquote. His defense psychiatrist concluded he was a latent homosexual. Jim Garrison, in an early theory, stressed the, quote, homosexual link between the conspirators. Whatever early theory Garrison may have entertained, the prosecution, to their credit, did not sensationalize the sexuality of the defendants that linked him to other conspirators. Shaw's fourth play, Stokers, establishes his zealous anti-communism at an early age. Shaw was born into a prominent family in 1913 in the small Louisiana town of Kentwood, his boyhood occurring in the midst of the first Red Scare. Shaw's grandfather was a sheriff and later a federal marshal, and his father had been a federal revenue agent. Given this environment, Shaw was destined to be politically conservative. Stokers was published in 1938 when Shaw was 25 in the geopolitical context of the terror of Joseph Stalin's great purges in the Soviet Union. In Stokers, a seeming communist, the middle-aged Karst, tries to convince the other Stokers on a steam-powered yacht owned by an explosive manufacturer to blow up the boat, setting an example for other radicals to follow in smashing capitalism, dying, quote, a martyr's beautiful death, unquote. The handsome, strapping Leon rejects Karst's rhetoric, but George, an educated young man from the elite class who has rejected his father's capitalism, subscribes to Karst's ideology. After Leon exits and George enters the boiler room, Karst gradually persuades George that the time for action is imminent, that they must martyr themselves. So far, the play maligns communism by linking it to sabotage and self-destruction, but the playwrights further reveal that Karst doesn't even believe his own propaganda. In reality, the reality of the play, Karst holds a personal vendetta against the gunpowder manufacturer, Mr. Manning, and his red rhetoric was fake. Karst had made plans to get away on a rowboat before the blast. The playwrights imply that communists are only looking to exploit and sacrifice others for their own gain. Karst explains after George asks why the other Stokers were to die in his plot, quote, "You don't matter," unquote. This early demonstration of Shaw's vehement anti-communism is important in light of the motivation of the conspiracy. Vocal free trade advocate Shaw was, not surprisingly, involved with anti-communists and became a CIA asset while he was director of the International Trade March in New Orleans, an organization that sought to promote trade and relations with Latin American nations, regardless of whether a right-wing dictator was running that country. When Cuba, which in 1959 supplied New Orleans with 18% of its imports, went communist, this was greatly detrimental to the trade of New Orleans. Arthur E. Carpenter writes, quote, "Wounded by the revolution and fearful of its spread, the New Orleans elite grew especially susceptible to an anti-communist appeal." Unquote. Clay Shaw, who never graduated from high school, yet cultivated a sophisticated mien, ingratiated himself into the elite classes. Quote, "Shaw's friends were extreme conservatives," Mellon writes, Joan Mellon. Shaw's involvement with shady, spooky organizations such as Pern Index, Italy's Centro Mondiale Commerciale, and anti-Castro Cubans connects him with ultra-right-wingers, neo-fascists, and old-world aristocrats, all toxic anti-communists. They held that Kennedy was dangerously soft on communism and ought not to have withheld promised air support at the Bay of Pigs. Shaw, an international businessman serving U.S. neo-colonialist interests in Latin America, did a banana bunch of spying for the CIA in the 50s. Lee Oswald was also connected to the CIA, which sheep-dipped the compliant Oswald as a, quote, communist with staged agitation for his fake chapter of Fair Play for Cuba. According to Joan Mellon, D. Eugenio, and William Davey, however, Oswald, Ferry, Rousseau, and Shaw were all right-wing anti-communists, despite Oswald's leftist front and Shaw's, quote, Wilsonian FDR, Kennedy liberal facade, and his remark that Kennedy was a splendid president. Coincidentally, Stokers depicts a middle-aged man attempting to guide a younger man named Leon, as Oswald was known to some, into a conspiracy to kill a prominent member of the power elite with the intention of allowing Leon to be sacrificed in the end. Shaw and Cotman's most famous and significant work is their debut, Submerged. Along with being their most successful play, it is also the most relevant to Clay Shaw's later alleged involvement in conspiracy. It features a character named Shaw. The play carries Freudian undertones, the literal denotation of 6 trapped sailors submerged in a distressed sub, is paired with the connotation of the subconscious, that which lies beneath the surface of one's actions and motivations, stated motivations. The crew, victimized by a violent storm, is forced into one compartment due to damage. The sub's equipment is broken and they can't send out distress signals. The noble commander declares that the only hope is for him to sacrifice himself by launching himself out of the torpedo hole. This means certain death, but the sub's location will be harnessed to his body, which will float to the top and be spotted by rescue ships. Here Shaw ponders the idea of the head, the commander, being sacrificed for the good of the body, the social unit. Despite the commander's noble decision, the crew refuses to allow him to sacrifice himself, ultimately deciding to draw cards to determine who will be shot into watery oblivion. But the, quote, dreamer, Shaw, steps up and offers himself as sacrifice. Embracing death, he reveals, I never did care. What does it matter, this endless, futile struggle? If I want to do it, I can, and I do want to do it. Unquote. Shaw's Freudian and archetypal symbolism is evident. Shaw's fascination for the sea represents his attraction to the mystery of death. Shaw's embrace of death reveals his thanatos, or death drive. Quote, the sea has always had something to tell me. I could never learn what it is. Maybe I'll find out now. Unquote. The willing sacrificial lamb, Shaw, is ejected out of a phallic submarine to his doom, but for the possible rebirth of his fellows, turning their watery tomb into womb, suggesting the connection between death and orgasm, or the little death, to the French, thanatos and eros. The character Shaw in this play bears scrutiny in light of later events and statements of Clay Shaw. In his work, Shaw reveals a literary mind with facility in symbolism and illusion. Connecting the character Shaw and author Clay Shaw, I stress the conflation of thanatos and eros, and the notion of the sacrificial lamb. It is understood that Shaw was a gay man who participated in sadomasochism, which I do not judge. An FBI memorandum of 1967 states that the Bureau received 3 past reports that Shaw is, quote, homosexual. In 1964, one informant tattled that he bedded Shaw, whom he described as a, quote, brilliant and powerful man given to sadism and masochism in his homosexual activities, unquote. In the upstairs bedroom of Shaw's home, detectives found chains, 5 whips, ropes, black robes, leather strips, and marble statues of penises following his arrest. Also, 2, quote, very large hooks were mounted in a white beam on the bedroom ceiling. Quote, you could clearly see to the side of each hook full handprints, unquote, on the white surface,